Every NFL season, all 32 teams are attempting to win their respective divisions. Some will fall short, whereas 8 teams will accomplish their goal. So in this video, I will be predicting the 8 winners for every division in the NFL in 2025. Subscribe and like the video if you do go on to enjoy. Let's hop into it. Now we are going to start with the AFC, and then halfway through we'll get to the NFC. There will be timestamps in the timeline, so if you want to check out your respective division, you can check it out, but I suggest watching the full video. And we are going to begin with the AFC North. And in the AFC North, I do have the Baltimore Ravens yet again winning this division. When I look at the landscape of this division, it is a division that from last year did get better, but not necessarily too much to overcome a team like Baltimore. I do think their biggest competition will be the Pittsburgh Steelers. Then I think the Bengals and the Cleveland Browns probably don't have a chance of winning the division. When it comes to the Baltimore Ravens, I think they have the best overall roster, arguably in the entire NFL, but definitely inside the AFC North. They don't have a ton of questions on this roster they really have to get answered. I think if there was a question, maybe it's the health of a Jair Alexander. What can they get from Kyle Van Noy at this stage of his career, even though, Kyle Van Noy had a great year last year. Can he replicate that over this year? Maybe some questions on the offensive line, but really those are all nitpicky questions. I feel like for the most part, this Ravens team is really set up for some success in 2025. They have, in my opinion, the best overall quarterback in the NFL, at least in the regular season. They also have, in my opinion, a top 3 running back in Derrick Henry, an improved receiving core now with DeAndre Hopkins. You also have Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman, hopefully gets even better. Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely. I think Isaiah Likely will probably take over that tight end 1 role at some point this season. At least I kind of hope so. And defensively speaking, especially in the second half of last year, they really picked things up. And now you get a second year from their defensive coordinator. He gets more continuity. He gets more experience. And I think this upcoming season, that defense is going to take a huge step forward. And when you compare the Baltimore Ravens to the likes of the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Steelers just have a lot of questions they still have to answer. What does 40-year-old quarterback Aaron Rodgers look like? What does the offensive line look like, especially the tackles? Who outside of DK Metcalf in the receiving core can seriously step up? Defensively, I don't have that many questions. I think they have an awesome defensive line with TJ Watt, Cam Hayward. I think Patrick Queen will have a better year this year. You did trade away a Minkah Fitzpatrick for Jalen Ramsey, so I think the cornerbacks will also be improved. You also have to mention Darius Slay. I think the defense for the Steelers is really good. I just don't think the offense will be able to keep up with a team like Baltimore. And then there's Cincinnati, a team that I think can score thousands of points, but I think defensively speaking, they're going to get let down more often than what they actually want. Jamar Chase, Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, Chase Brown, that offense will be good enough to get the job done, but I think defensively, they're going to be really let down because the defense just has so many questions, and because they just paid Trey Hendrickson and they just barely paid Shamar Stewart just about a month ago, there's not going to be so much continuity, and that's a big deal in my opinion. So I think that the Cincinnati Bengals could make the playoffs, but I'm not thinking they're going to win the division, not unless Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase literally win MVP and Offensive Player of the Year, which, I mean, hell, they almost did it last year. Whereas for Cleveland, Shador, Dillon, Joe Flacco, it doesn't really matter. The quarterbacks just simply are not good enough, and the overall roster itself also is not very good. There's questions scattered throughout this roster. I think Kevin Stefanski is a fine head coach who definitely is deserving of keeping his job, but the rest of the team around him is not very good. So this is Baltimore's division to win. I think Baltimore has a pretty easy path to get the victory here. Next up, the AFC South, and I am going to go with the Houston Texans. Now, again, another repeat champion here. The Houston Texans have won it the past 2 years, and I think they're going to win it for a 3rd straight year. I like where this division is heading. I think it's just going to take one more year before a team like Houston could potentially be taken over. Let's start off with the Houston Texans. I think they have a spectacular defense that has some secondary members that are willing to take some turnovers. They can get after the quarterback. They have great linebackers that can get downhill and be excellent in run support. The only question I really have on this defense is what does the interior pass rush look like? But outside of that, that is very nitpicky stuff. And on the offensive end, I do worry a lot about this offensive line, but they have a great quarterback. I think they have 2 really good running backs. I'm excited to see this new offensive coordinator, not to mention some new weapons on the outside, like, Nico Collins returns, but Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel both in there. So I'm really intrigued to see how this offense looks. The offensive line keeps me from calling this team a potential Super Bowl contender because I think this offensive line is straight trash. But if this offensive line can just end up being somewhere between 20 to 25 in terms of being the best in the NFL, like the 20 or 25th, then this Texans team is going to cruise to this division. The overall division in and out of itself has a lot of teams with a lot of young quarterbacks, or they're rebuilding, or they're just kind of stuck in this weird spot. For example, the Colts have a roster that should be competing with the likes of the Texans. Their roster is very, very good. But then you look at the quarterback room and they have Anthony Richardson and Daniel Jones. Neither one of those quarterbacks, as much as I like Anthony Richardson and as much as I think he has talent, none of those guys are ready to take that big step to become a franchise guy. Is it possible that Daniel Jones has a Gardner Minshew-like season? Yes, but if that's the case, I still think the Colts probably end up second place in the division with like a 9-8, 10-7 record. And I think the Houston Texans are going to easily probably win 11 or 12 games next year. The Jacksonville Jaguars, I like where they're heading, especially on the offensive end. I think Liam Cohen is going to have success with that offense. And I think Trevor Lawrence could be in for a pretty nice bounce back year. But then I look at the defense. I think the interior defensive line still has question marks. The secondary, especially if Travis Hunter is not a full-time corner, has some question marks that I think need to be answered. Safeties, linebackers, everything defensively could use some work. And on the offensive end, while I like BTJ and I think Travis Hunter will play a big-time role, there's some question marks here about, tight ends, the running backs, Liam Cohen in and of himself as a head coach. There's a lot to be proven here, but I do think the Jaguars are heading in the right direction. It's just, in my opinion, like one year too early to give them the nod to win this division. And then the Tennessee Titans, I like where they're going as a roster. I think Cam Ward will be a great quarterback in the future. They got some pieces here and there with a nice mixture of veterans and some youth, but they're just not there yet either. I mean, if L'Jarius Sneed has a great season this year and Cam Ward plays like Jaden Daniels, then sure, give it to the Titans, but that would be very shocking. I think the Texans are the heavy favorite for a reason, and I think they're going to ultimately win this division. Next up, the AFC East, and again, another repeat, and I hate to be boring. It's the Buffalo Bills. Look, this East is just not very good right now. I know there's so much hype and momentum building for the Patriots, and I hate to be the guy, but guys, the Bills are just the better team, all right? They're just way better than this Patriots team. The Patriots have some really good pieces, and we'll get to them here in a second, but specifically with the Bills really don't have too many flaws. Like, they're not a perfect roster by no means. I don't think they're as good as the Ravens or the Eagles, which we'll talk about here in a little bit in terms of an actual overall roster. But the Bills are right up there with anybody. They also have, in my opinion, the second best quarterback, and for some, the best quarterback, and I really don't disagree with them. Josh Allen is an awesome quarterback who's just as good as the Lamars, the Burrows, and the Mahomes of the world. When you have that quarterback who can basically Superman a team to a playoff win, it makes it so much easier to win games. Not to mention, on the offensive line, they're stacked with talent. They just paid their running back. They have some good tight ends, some fun little weapons there, a great offensive coordinator. So their offense is really, really good. And defensively speaking, they invested in their defensive line by adding a lot of pieces to that unit, both in the draft and in free agency. They also addressed cornerback here too. So this Bills team is a lot better team from what they were last year. I'm not saying they don't have their fair share of questions, because they definitely do. But when you have a Josh Allen and when you have the continuity and experience of this team, you're just going to be the heavy favorites for a good reason. And when you look at the rest of the AFC East, the Miami Dolphins, like I think their roster's fine, but their offensive line is not going to be very good this year. Tyreek Hill, maybe there's some regression there. Waddle's still good. Devon Achane's a fun player. Can Tua stay healthy? What does the secondary look like, especially with all the new faces now in that room? Can they stay healthy on the defensive line? There's just too many questions for my liking. And I just don't think this Dolphins team is going to be as good as what they were a few years ago. I think offensively, if Tua can stay healthy, they'll be fine and they will be a competitive team. But this defense, in my opinion, is just not good enough right now. And again, they have an issue where they can't win the big games. They can't win in certain conditions. And I wouldn't be surprised if their head coach gets fired at some point, because this team is just not in the right direction. So for Miami, I don't really think they're a serious threat. Yes, they can score. They'll beat some teams, but the Bills have handled them the past couple of seasons, so I'm not too concerned about them. Let's talk about the Patriots. Look, I think this Patriots team is very much improved. They had a very aggressive offseason and a very excellent draft where they added multiple pieces to both the offense and the defense that I think will be massive contributors for this team. But as I've said throughout the offseason, just give them one more year. They are really close to being an excellent team. Give them one more year. Another year of development with Drake May, another year of adding to this offensive line, another year of adding to the defensive line, primarily off the edge, and maybe another receiver or two. But outside of that, this Patriots team has just a ton of talent. They have a nice, fun quarterback who I think will be a great player in a few years. I love their head coach in Mike Vrabel. You add a Stephon Diggs. I love Kyle Williams. Travion Henderson should be in for a big year. You improve some pieces on the offensive line. The defense, you added Milton Williams and Carlton Davis and all those guys. I think there's a lot of things really good and positive going on with this Patriots team. Just give them one more year. They're going to be a 8 to 9 win team, maybe 7 wins at worst. They're going to be competitive. They're going to win a lot of games. It's going to be a super fun season. One more year before I can seriously start to consider this Patriots team, and they're going to have to prove a lot to me this year to pick them over the Bills. So we'll have to wait and see. Then the AFC West, and I'm going to go with the Kansas City Chiefs. I know, boring. I went with 4 straight repeats. I understand, throw the tomatoes at the screen, but look, I just can't pick the Broncos right now over the Chiefs. I think the Broncos defense is better than Kansas City. I think the Broncos have a great offensive line that's also better than Kansas City. My thing with the Denver Broncos, as high as I am on them, and by the way, to Broncos fans who are pissed off at me, I have the Broncos as a dark horse Super Bowl contender this year, so take that as you will. The one thing they cannot replicate is the experience of a Patrick Mahomes on this roster. They have Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, and Andy Reid. And as long as you have those 3 guys, their offense is going to be able to get the task done. Their defense is really good. They keep them in games. They have pass rushers, secondary members. They can create turnovers. Their defense is extremely well coached. They're very disciplined. Yes, there's some new faces here and there, but they always are able to recover. That defense is going to be very good. And on the offensive end, while I don't think this offense is going to be super high powered, Mahomes going for 4 touchdowns a game like it was with, Tyreek Hill and Kelce in their primes, I'm not expecting that. But they have the pieces, especially when they do get Rashee Rice back. I think they're going to be totally fine. Mahomes just finds a way to win, and that's what it's going to be this upcoming season. Whereas for the Denver Broncos, look, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but they barely snuck into the playoffs. And let's be honest, when the Broncos went up against high-level competition, more times than not, they ended up losing. Not saying that's going to be the case this year, or not saying they were a bad team last year. They were a great team. That was a fun story. This upcoming season, I think they'll be even better. I think this is the best defense in the NFL with one of the best offensive lines, with one of the best play callers in Sean Payton. It's just for right now, how can I predict the Broncos to beat a team like the Chiefs in this division when the Chiefs have proven to me for the past 8 years that they can just find ways to win games, whereas the Denver Broncos, I haven't seen that same success. So I have the Chiefs winning the division. You kind of hear my spiel about the Broncos. I think the Broncos are a stacked team that could easily give the Chiefs a run for their money. And hell, if you tell me the Broncos win this division, I really wouldn't be that shocked. Then there's the Chargers. I think the Chargers would have had an easier conversation if they did have Rashawn Slater, but Rashawn Slater's out of the mix. This is a team that's going to be very predicated on their offensive line running the football. When you lose out on a guy like a Rashawn Slater, it does really hurt your team. I think they'll be fine, and I think they'll be able to overcome that, but it will affect them in some ways. I think they still will be effective running the football with their 2 new running backs. Justin Herbert's an awesome quarterback who, yes, he struggles in the playoffs, but in the regular season, doesn't turn the ball over, is really accurate, is really effective, really efficient as well. And this defense made a lot of people wrong last year. This defense was really good. They have a great defensive coordinator, a lot of young talent, and some of the older talent are still playing at a very high level. So this Chargers team has a very good shot too. I just can't predict them over a team like Denver or even Kansas City, specifically because of the Rashawn Slater injury and just because I think the Broncos and Chiefs are just a better team right now. And then when it comes to the Raiders, again, good direction, but that defense is going to be really bad. I like Brock, I like Genty, I like Geno Smith. I hope they keep Jacoby Myers. They also did bring in Amari Cooper. So I think the offense should be pretty fun. They have a good offensive line. It's okay, but the defense is really going to let them down. Yes, you have Max Crosby, but outside of that, secondary is pretty weak. I think they can honestly find 2 or 3 upgrades there within the secondary. I also worry a little bit about this pass rush opposite of Max Crosby because, the injuries and no more Christian Wilkins. So I just think the defense is going to let down for the Raiders, but I think offensively they're going to be really fun. Now, before we get into the NFC side of things, I did just want to briefly mention that I've already done dedicated videos for every single one of these divisions where I break down, what I think the division is going to look like, what their future is. So if you want to check it out, go subscribe and check out the rest of my videos. You will see a whole list of the AFC and the NFC separate videos for each division, so go ahead and check them out. With that said, let's hop into the NFC North. And in the NFC North, I have the Green Bay Packers. Now, you guys know me. I'm a Cowboys fan, so you guys know I'm a big fan of Micah Parsons, who's no longer on my team. And yes, I cried for about 13 hours and drank a whole lot of you know what, to get over it. I'm kidding. I saw it and I scrolled away and took a nap. That's what I really did. This is a Packers team that, in my opinion, is loaded with talent. You add in a Micah Parsons to a defense that felt like they were one superstar away. You add that guy to the defensive line who can absolutely dominate in terms of getting to the quarterback. He can also play really well against the run. You pair him opposite of Rashawn Gary and Lucas Van Ness. I think it's really going to open up this defense. It's going to help out this secondary that has some question marks in the cornerback room. I think Xavier McKinney is going to force a lot of turnovers next year, in all honesty, because of Micah Parsons forcing some errant throws or tight window throws that could give McKinney an opportunity. I expect them defensively to be a whole lot better. Micah Parsons is a game changer, right? He is very close to the Myles Garretts, the Nick Bosas, TJ Watts of the world, those guys that can completely wreck games. Micah Parsons is of that level. You also give the dude more money and probably a lot of motivation after what happened with the Dallas Cowboys. And I'm sure this dude is going to go off for a massive, potentially personal best season for Micah Parsons. Then on the offensive end, you double down on offensive line by adding a ton of new faces to that room. You have depth, you have quality starters. You have your franchise tackle in Zach Tom, paid $2. You also brought in Matthew Golden, who I don't really know if I feel great about him as my wide receiver 1 yet. But from what I saw in preseason, the dude can get open, and if him and Jordan Love can create a connection, I think they're going to get a lot of productivity out of him early on. You do have some depth there in the room as well. Not to mention, they're going to run the crap out of Josh Jacobs with some of the new offensive line faces out there too. They're going to run a whole lot. As long as Jordan Love can limit the turnovers, which he really did a good job of late into last year, this Packers team is literally built for success. Continuity within the coaching staff too gives them a boost over some of the other teams. So I got the Green Bay Packers having a very successful 2025 season. Now, with that said, that does not mean I think they're the best team in the NFC North. I think they're just going to win the most games. And when you get to the playoffs, if the Packers and Lions were to face, it's kind of a toss-up game. So the rest of the teams in the NFC North, I like the Detroit Lions a lot. Obviously, Jared Goff, I mean, you go down the board here, just so much talent. But there is some questions they have to answer. Offensive coordinator change, defensive coordinator change, Aiden Hutchinson coming off a broken leg, a new starting center. These are all big things that they have to prove to me before I can realistically expect them to be of the likes of the Packers or the Eagles and a couple other teams. But the Lions are a team that I easily could see winning this division. They have so much talent. And if the OC change and the DC change don't really matter, the starting center is capable and the edge rusher and Hayden Hutchinson is great, then this team might be right back in the conversation to win 13 or 14 games, potentially win the division. For now, because I haven't seen these changes and I haven't been able to check a box off yet, I'm going to have the Packers, who in my opinion have checked off a lot of their boxes this offseason, but the Lions are really close. Then there is the Minnesota Vikings. I think the Vikings have truly one of the best rosters in the NFL with an awesome head coach that I think is going to be really good. But in the most important position, they're inexperienced and frankly a little bit limited early on. And I love JJ McCarthy. I was not the biggest fan of him as a prospect, but because JJ is essentially a rookie this upcoming season, and because I think they're going to kind of take things slow with him by giving him a lot of easy things, they're going to have to rely a lot more on the defense. And there's some general questions about the provenness of the cornerback room, especially with Isaiah Rodgers potentially being your CB1. I do think this team is very talented though, and they're going to win a lot of games. They could be kind of like they were last year, right in the mix of things, very late. Maybe they win it, maybe they don't, but they should be a playoff team. And then there is the Chicago Bears. Kind of like the Patriots, I just have to say, just give it one more year. This NFC North is loaded with talent, and they got 6 games versus the NFC North. And if they go 2-4 in the division, or 1-5 or 0-6, worst case scenario, I mean, it kind of takes them out of the conversation immediately. I just look at the Packers, the Lions, and even the Vikings and say, there's more continuity, there's more chemistry, and they're just better teams right now. Now, the Bears are really close, and shoot, for all we know, Caleb Williams has a breakout sophomore season, and the whole division dynamics are tossed up in the air. I don't think they'll win the division. Best case scenario, they're the 7th or 6th seed. I think that's best case scenario, but you never know. Next up, the NFC South, and I'm going to stick with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, the Atlanta Falcons are really close in my opinion. I think they are really close to winning this division. I think they're on the verge of taking that next step. Ultimately, though, I just believe that the Buccaneers did a good enough job this offseason to ultimately keep their mantle on the top of the NFC South. I loved their draft, adding a Benjamin Morrison, a Mecca Egbuka, another cornerback too that I'm forgetting on the top of my head. And then the offseason, you added a Hassan Reddick. On the offensive end, you did lose Liam Cohen, which does make me very worried, but I think Baker Mayfield is starting to play his best football of his career. Yes, I know his best year was with Liam Cohen, and maybe there could be some worries there. I think they're going to be fine. I think Baker Mayfield's going to be awesome next year. They have so many weapons, a top-notch offensive line, and an RB1 in Bucky Irving that I feel really good about. You know, the OC change is worrying, but I'm not generally too concerned about it. And on the defensive end, I didn't think they addressed their biggest needs in a serious enough way. I think linebacker is still kind of concerning, but if Hassan Reddick can return back to his previous form in 2023 by getting close to 10 sacks next year, that's going to seriously elevate this defensive line. They can stuff the run. They got Vita Vea, but can they get after the quarterback? And then in this offseason too, they added 2 new faces to the cornerback room. We'll see if those guys can be impactful starters week 1 or some point this season. They have some flexibility there too. They can move some pieces around with some youth and some vets. I really do like this secondary. And all in all, this team just has a lot of experience that a team like Atlanta now doesn't have. Now, Atlanta would be my team that I think is very, very close to winning this division. And I think the world of Michael Penix Jr. I had Michael Penix Jr. as one of my top quarterbacks in that draft class. And heading into this season, I think he's going to be a really good quarterback for this Falcons team. I think the Falcons feel pretty confident about him because they did not have this dude play in the preseason, which kind of tells me a lot. With this team, though, there is some changes here. There's a new starting center. They're also having some injuries at tackle to start the season off, but they should be fine there. I'm not worried about it. Michael Penix Jr. just doesn't have the experience. I know he has the weapons with Bijan, London. I think Pitts could honestly have a really good year this year. The offensive line should be good. And defensively, they have a decent enough defense to win a lot of games. It just kind of comes down to the inexperience factor of Michael Penix Jr. I think by next year, if 2025 or this upcoming season is successful, we can have a whole different conversation about this Falcons team, about making the playoffs and maybe making a bit of a run. But let's wait and see first. There's also some inexperience with the edge rushers because you do now add in a Jalen Walker and a James Pierce Jr. who give you a lot of juice off the edge. And I think against slow-footed tackles, they'll find a lot of success. But in terms of nuance, they each kind of have their own little bit of limitations that could slow them down in their first year. I think they're very talented guys, though. So all in all, I do think the Falcons have a shot, but I'm going to give the slight edge to the Buccaneers. Then after that, you have the Panthers, who I think will take a step forward. I think Bryce Young will be really good. I think the offense will be really good, but that defense is going to lose them a lot of games. It's just not good enough. They'll be better against the run because they have Derek Brown, but against the pass, they're going to struggle. They don't really have any serious pass rushers. They made some upgrades. It's a better defense. It's a better offense, but they're not going to be that much better. I'm thinking 6 or 7 wins next year. And then the Saints, I mean, look, Spencer Rattler's your starting quarterback. That's kind of the end of the conversation. Yes, Tyler Shock might start at some point, but this roster is just 2 to 3 to 4 years away from being any sort of serious threat in the NFC South. Next up, the NFC East, and I have the Philadelphia Eagles yet again win this division, and that would be the first time we have seen a repeat champion in, I want to say, like 20 plus years. It has been a long time since we've had a repeat in the NFC East, and frankly, I wouldn't be surprised if a team like the Commanders find a way to win this division, or maybe the Dallas Cowboys, but I gotta go with the Philadelphia Eagles. Unless injuries kill this team this year, which, you know, for their sake, I hope doesn't happen, but as a Cowboys fan, I kind of hope it does. No serious injuries, though, just, you know, little knick-knack injuries. The Eagles, though, if injuries don't impact their season, which they shouldn't because they've been fairly healthy the past few years, they have a great quarterback, a great receiver, a great wide receiver too, good tight end, one of the best offensive lines, the best running back in the NFL, a defensive line that can absolutely go. New faces on the edge, but I feel pretty good about Nolan Smith there. Great linebackers, great members in the secondary, some great safeties. This is just a team that has really no flaws. Yes, there's some new faces on the defense, and sure, they may not be as good as they were last year on the defensive side of things, but that defense is still better than Washington's and Dallas, and on the offensive end, that offense is still better than Washington's and Dallas. So I just think that the Eagles should be able to cruise to this one. They won the Super Bowl last year for a reason, and I think this year they'll be the favorites for a reason too. Now, Washington, I think, is the next team that I think is the closest. I was not the biggest fan of what they did this offseason. I thought in some ways they went about things in a way that I don't really agree with. I like staying young. I like having youth. I like building towards the future. Commander said, screw that. We're going to go with a whole bunch of vets. Debo, Laramie Tunsil, Von Miller. Last year they traded for Marshawn Lattimore, and that's one way of going about it. I, again, probably would have went with a bit more youth. It's kind of an older roster, but, you know, with this being an older roster, there's a lot of experience on this team, and you kind of know what you're going to get from a lot of these guys. They also did just pay Terry McLaurin. I think the offensive line is also going to be pretty good next year. Jaden Daniels is a difference maker at quarterback. He is just somebody that just will find ways to get this team to some wins. I still think Philadelphia is better, but I think Washington is close, albeit their schedule is kind of tough this year. Then there's the Dallas Cowboys. Now, I know the Cowboys have been getting a lot of shit for the Micah Parsons deal, and frankly, rightfully so, but I don't think they're that much worse of a roster. In fact, in some ways, I think they're better, but not necessarily as an overall team. Adding Kenny Clark does give this team a run stuffer, which they have not had in years at this point, and I think they have some depth in the pass rushing room with Dante Fowler, Ezraku, Sam Williams, and Marshawn Nealon, so I think they should be fine on the defensive line. I just worry about this rushing attack on the offensive end. Very young offensive line that's very unproven. Dak Prescott's also been dealing with injuries the past couple of years. Javonte Williams is your RB1, which I don't feel great about, but the receivers are fantastic. I think this offense will be good because it's going to be relying on Dak Prescott. And say what you want to say about Dak Prescott, but when this team does not have a ground game, Dak Prescott has still been able to manage to get this team to some top 5, top 10 offense levels. I mean, let's look back at 2023. Yes, I know Pollard was there, but Pollard barely got over 1,000 yards that season, and that offense was really good. 2022, kind of the same story. Zeke was out of his prime by like 2019, and even after that, Dak Prescott still led some very capable offenses. You now added George Pickens, who I think is an awesome fit. They're going to be able to pass the ball, but I have some questions about the defense, the general health of the team, the coaching of the team as well, so I can't really put my money on them. And then for the New York Giants, their schedule is just brutal this upcoming season. New quarterbacks in Russell Wilson, Jackson Dart. There's talent on the defensive side of things. I think a lot of people are underestimating the Giants, but frankly, I don't see them winning a lot of games because their schedule is pretty tough. So unfortunately, they'll probably come in last. And lastly, in the NFC West, I have the LA Rams winning the division. I think the Rams are one of the more underrated teams in the entire NFL. I think a lot of people are sleeping on them, although I have been seeing a lot of buzz too. The entirety of the NFC West, by the way, I think is very damn good. And I kind of think this is a bit of a toss-up division. I think Seattle will be in the conversation. San Francisco has a pretty easy schedule. They could be in the conversation. I think Arizona's also pretty talented too, so I would not be surprised if they won the division either. I think the Rams are the best team though. I love their front seven on the defensive end. I think there's enough talent in the back end to get the job done. And if Stafford can just stay healthy, Puka Nacua, Devontae Adams, Kyron Williams, solid offensive line, a new face at tight end with Terrence Ferguson. It's a loaded offense. You also have Sean McVay, who's going to keep this team rolling. I think the Rams have a ton of talent on this roster, and they can absolutely go. I think the Seattle Seahawks are probably my second team in this division, but I think it's really close between them and Arizona and San Francisco. The Seattle Seahawks have a lot of things going for them this upcoming season, but questions on the offensive line with both play and overall health. I like this secondary. I like the front seven. I think they're going to be very good next year. Can they create turnovers? Can they be consistent? Those are things I want to see. And then on the offensive end, what does Sam Darnold look like? One of the big things I do want to see, what does the Seahawks offense look like when they're not able to run the football? Are they going to be able to pass the ball effectively, when they're not balanced? Because I think this is going to be a team that's going to rely on balance. And if they become unbalanced, what does that look like? I love this team, though. I love their offensive coordinator. I love their head coach. A lot of good things going for Seattle. I would not be surprised if they won this division. Then there is the Cardinals. I think I love this roster in a lot of ways, but it's give me one more year. I love Kyler Murray. I love Marvin Harrison Jr. I need to see that connection get a little bit better. I want to see some improvements on the offensive line, either this year or next offseason. And then defensively, Will Johnson, Walter Nolan, some other young guys. What can you get out of them? I think one more season with another productive draft, another productive free agency period, and this Cardinals team could be right in the conversation. And then San Francisco, as I mentioned, has a very easy schedule that could allow them to win the division. But I got a lot of questions on this team. Health is looking like it could be a factor this year with all the injuries on the roster. Ayuk is going to be out for a few weeks. Trent Williams hopefully will be healthy. Christian McCaffrey is kind of the swing factor. If he's good, then that changes a whole lot of things. Defensively, a lot of new faces. Just so many questions with this Niners team that have to be answered that I feel not comfortable putting them in the top spot in the NFC West. But you guys let me know in the comment section below, do you disagree with any of my division winners? And if you do, let me know. Hit the like and subscribe button if you enjoy. Love you guys. Peace.